Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to our 21st episode. Today I'm flying solo because Danny is in New York taking care of some things, so he can't be with us today. Luckily, I've lined up a fantastic interview for you guys, and we think you're really going to enjoy it and learn some amazing things. Gluten may not be as simple as you think. I'll leave it at that, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. All right, guys, so today we have Bob Quinn from Montana, who started out with a handful of Kamut seeds in the 70s and now produces over 40 million pounds of Khorasan wheat a year on his Montana farm and on 150 other organic farms in North Dakota and parts of Canada. Kamut is used in thousands of products produced worldwide, including breads, pasta, cereals, snacks, pastries, crackers, beer, grain coffee, green foods, and a delicious wheat drink. Bob, thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Matt. It's great to be here.
Bob, you started in 1977. Can you tell us the story behind Kamut?
Well, the story of this ancient grain really started several years before that. I had seen the what was purported to be King Tut's wheat at a county fair that I attended when I was just a high school kid. An old man was passing out this grain by the handful out of a bucket, an old coffee can. He said to me, he says, "Hey, Sonny," he says, "would you like some of King Tut's wheat?" And it was quite a novelty. And I said, "Sure." And went over and he poured this handful of grain out of the can into my hand, and it was giant. It was 2 or 3 times the size of regular wheat. I was raised on a wheat farm, so I was well familiar with what wheat looked like. And we had a wheat and cattle ranch in north central Montana. And I didn't really think much about it after that. The novelty kind of wore off and the grain disappeared. It actually showed up in our county about 1950. A young serviceman had a friend who'd been to Egypt and claimed he had taken a handful of grain out of a tomb, and this friend of his then sent some of the grain home to his father that lived in our county, and he had been growing it for several years. It was mostly a novelty. Nobody had any really use for it. It wasn't easy to make the white air bread that was popular in America at the time, and there wasn't any other use that anyone could see for it. So it was after the novelty wore out, it kind of disappeared. In 1977, I was in graduate school at the University of California at Davis, finishing a PhD in plant biochemistry, and I was eating a package of corn nuts one afternoon just to have a break from the lab, and on the package it said corn nuts made with a giant corn, and I thought to myself, I wonder if these corn nuts guys would be interested in a giant wheat. And I called them up. They were not far away in Oakland, and they said, yeah, we might be interested in that. And so then I called my dad and I said, Dad, see if you can find some of that old King Tut's wheat. And within a week he called back and said, I found a pint jar about half full and a few heads. And I said, well, send me a tablespoon or two. And I sent that down to corn nuts, and they thought it was fantastic. And they said, this is really good. We want to start immediately. How much do you have? And I hemmed and hawed quite a long time before I told them I had about a cup full. And that was the kind of the end of the discussion, because that wasn't, of course, enough for them to do anything with. But I said, if you give me a couple of years, I'll grow up whatever you want. And that didn't happen. And we did grow it, however, in our garden. And by the time we had 100 pounds or so, the corn nuts people had moved on, and the contacts I had there were gone. So we just put it in our shed for a couple of years and took it to a food show in about in '86. And my dad actually accompanied me. My mom and dad went with me and my wife. We were selling stone ground whole wheat flour from a flour mill I had started nearby Fort Benton. And my dad showed this to everybody who passed by our booth. And after 3 days, finally one person said, wow, that's just what I'm looking for. On that one person's interest, we got it out of the shed and we planted a half acre in 1986. And the rest is history. Now it's about maybe 70,000, 80,000 acres this year, spread over Montana, Alberta, and Saskatchewan mostly.
And just to confirm for listeners, Kamut is Khorasan wheat, which is wheat. Would you consider it a grain?
Well, actually, Kamut is a trademark. It's not the name of the grain at all. It's a trademark that we use to market an ancient wheat, whose common name is Coruscant, just like spelt is an ancient wheat whose common name is spelt. Vita spelt is a trademark used to sell spelt, but we use Kamut to sell Coruscant wheat, and the Kamut trademark, which I own, has certain guarantees. If I own the trademark, I get to make the rules. And the first rule is it has to always be organically grown. You must tell the truth about it. You must say that it's wheat and has gluten. You can't pretend that it's not wheat or it's gluten-free. Even though most people who cannot eat modern wheat and have trouble eating gluten products can eat it without any difficulty. You must also guarantee that products you make with Kamut brand wheat are 100% Coruscant or 100% this ancient grain, not mixed with any other wheat. And we also guarantee certain nutritional values of protein, minerals such as selenium have to be a certain percent, and the purity, and also free of disease. So there's quite a few things that the Kamut trademark guarantees. Now, because it's not an ownership of the grain in any way, anybody who wants to can plant the grain and use it any way they want. The Coruscant wheat is considered a gift from our Creator, and it's free for anyone to plant and to use. But if they're going to use the Kamut trademark, then they need to follow the rules and be part of our program so we can guarantee the customers that the promises of the trademark are met.
So, Robert, let's just say I have a farm in North Dakota and I'm growing Coruscant wheat organically. I would have to contact you and follow the rules of your program if I wanted you to buy my Coruscant wheat. Is that correct?
Right. If you wanted to sell it as Kamut, then you'd have to go through our program and into our system so that it could be verified that it really was Kamut. If you wanted to sell it as Coruscant or Matt's favorite ancient wheat, you could do whatever you wanted with it in that regard.
And Robert, you mentioned gluten, and in a pretty fascinating book that I read by Michael Pollan, they talked about the whole idea that people that do have problems with gluten in general, it's because of genetically modified food that they develop this intolerance of gluten, as far as I understand. But you're saying that, with Kamut, a lot of people that have problems with wheat and gluten, they're able to eat it. Can you give me an overview of the health benefits of Kamut?
Sure. There's many health benefits of Kamut brand grain. The origin of most of those health benefits are from the fact that it was an ancient grain and remains an ancient grain to this day. It's never been hybridized. It's never been crossed with modern wheat or changed in any way. The last 50 to 60, 70 years, the breeding programs for wheat in this country have had two main goals. One is high yield, and the second is large loaf volumes. So you can make the big white fluffy loaf of bread that Americans all were brought up on the last 2 or 3 generations. When they do that, they change, and as far as our research has been able to determine, not only the gluten has been changed, but the starch nature of the starch has been changed. The nature of the antioxidants have been changed. There's fewer varieties of phenolic compounds, which are strong antioxidants. The starch is much different. The gluten is way, way different. And I think the big change in the gluten, particularly to make big loaves of bread, is probably done more to cause trouble with people's digestion than anything else. Although we haven't done the research on that to demonstrate it, but we have done a lot of research comparing modern wheat with ancient grain in the University of Bologna and the University of Florence, since they're very, very interested in this problem in Italy. And we've seen a remarkable differences. We've seen that ancient grain has a much higher antioxidant capacity than modern wheat, and also that it is anti-inflammatory, which is just the opposite of what we saw in modern wheat, is causing low levels of inflammation to the people that eat it.
So a lot of times, this happens a lot in health. They're just, make generalizations because not everyone has the time to understand the science and really read into something. It could be with vitamin C or all sorts of things. So it's really, the big takeaway here is that ancient wheat is different, is significantly different than modern wheat and how your body absorbs and digests it.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Matt. And what some authors have kind of simplified this whole wheat-free, gluten-free craze into just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, whereas there is a problem with modern wheat for a lot of people. But actually, if they ate ancient wheat and ancient grains, they would not only see their problems with modern wheat, in most all cases, diminish significantly. They would gain health benefits from it being high in antioxidants and high in anti-inflammatory properties that would help them with other chronic diseases. And that's the research that we are in the midst of right now. We just finished publishing a paper on irritable bowel syndrome, and we found that people on diets of Kamut brand products for 6 weeks, all of their symptoms improved, somewhere between 50 and 100% improvement in their symptoms for irritable bowel syndrome. And that was an amazing difference in comparison to modern wheat, where there was no difference, no significant difference in their symptoms. And when they did the blood test, found with the blood analysis, there was no change on the people eating modern wheat, where the people who ate the ancient grain had significant higher levels of inflammatory markers. The cytokines in their blood that were markers of anti-inflammatory properties were much higher.
So that's really, really interesting. And I'm going to link to some of these studies on the website. A question for you, Bob. The antioxidant profile, do you guys happen to know the ORAC, O-R-A-C, of Kamut?
No, that's a good question. That was my original question to my friends in Italy, and they said, well, rather than most of that information, or a lot of it is, from what I understand, was taken from in vitro testing, and what they said that they would rather have us do a in vivo test using living systems. So we didn't come up with that kind of a number. What we came up with was just a comparison straight across with two different diets, one of modern wheat and one of ancient wheat. But our papers are all on our website, Kamut.com, for anybody who's really interested in delving into the particulars of that.
Now, moving on to the marketing.
Okay.
I'm pretty interested, first off, what would you say are your main channels and efforts for marketing in the U.S. as well as abroad?
Well, we first started out going to health food shows. The two biggest ones in America were Expo East and Expo West. The Expo West was in Anaheim, California, and the East was held in Washington or Philadelphia or Baltimore. In the early days, almost all of the organic and natural food, health food manufacturers were there, and I would just go visit them every year, and my mother would bake cookies or brownies or whatever, shortbread or whatever that was yummy. When we started producing pasta, she'd make pasta salads, and we'd take around all these samples and give them to people and try them so they would get a taste and a flavor for what we were trying to promote. And our big break came when Arrowhead Mills, who was owned and founded by Frank Ford, who was always there at the time, decided to make a Kamut cold cereal called Kamut Flakes. And when that happened, within a few months, it went to their number 2 seller right after, only exceeded by Corn Flakes throughout the whole country. And that really put us on the map and got us going. And because of that, the Kamut brand grain was used more for cold cereals than anything else in America. But yet, because of the lead of Arrowhead Mills, a lot of other companies followed suit, and our sales and recognition went way up. We also had a few pasta manufacturers and a few bread manufacturers producing Kamut brand pasta and bread, but it was very small compared to the cold cereal market.
Gotcha. I had no idea of the history. I went to Natural Products Expo East for the first time last year in Baltimore, but I guess it's been around for many, many years. That's really cool. Now, if I'm correct here, I'm pretty sure, just from reading online, that Kamut, there's more Kamut sold in Italy than anywhere else. Is that correct?
That's right, and that really came as a big surprise to us. We first went to Europe in about 91, and at first we hooked up with a Belgian company called Lima, and they brought us into Europe and introduced us into Belgium through their products, and then into Germany through Rapunzel, who was the leading organic and company in Germany at the time, and still one of the leaders in the world today. Took off in Europe just much quicker than it had in America. It was first used as bread, and if you think about people in Northern Europe eating bread 2 or 3 times a day, and in America we're eating cold cereal 2 or 3 times a week, you can see the potential for growth is already much, much greater than we had here, according to how it was used mostly. And then within about 5 or 6 years, it was picked up in Italy without us even introducing it there. We were told in the very beginning that it was too expensive and too high a price grain, that it would never sell in Italy. But the Italians picked it up anyway, and they just loved it, and they made it into probably more than 1,200 different products made in Italy today, and they're taking more than 65% of all the grain produced, sold into Italy.
So out of all kamut that is produced, Italy consumes over half, is that correct?
65%, over 65%.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's almost two-thirds now of everything produced goes to Italy, and they have over 2/3 of the different products. They have a much wider range of products than all the rest of the world combined. They're making ice cream with it, for heaven's sakes, because they have the kamut drink. They don't call it milk there, like we call it rice milk here. We could call it kamut milk here, but in Europe, if it doesn't come from an animal, you can't call it milk, so they call it a drink. But with that, they can make cheese and ice cream and anything you can make with a milk-like product, for example. I mean, it's something very unusual.
Wow, that's really interesting to know. I have a lot of friends, a lot of my family friends are from Italy. I'm going to have to ask them about
Oh,
this.
really? Yeah, well, if they shop in the health food stores, they should be familiar with it, because it's everywhere in the health food stores there.
Wow, good to know. Now, just so you know, Bob, on a couple of our previous episodes, we've talked a lot to either coffee importers, coffee roasters, and a lot of people in the coffee market. You know, I'm based out of Colombia, which is a huge coffee place, and we've discussed a few times the lives of farmers. And for coffee, you know, it's quite difficult to be a coffee farmer, especially if you're not involved with the specialty gourmet coffee. Just the price is pretty low. I'm interested, how are the lives of kamut farmers? Can you tell me about their quality of life, economic benefits of being a kamut farmer, anything else that would be interesting for our listeners?
Well, for Kamut brand grain, we contract with only organic farmers. So we're only dealing with organic farmers, and part of the main principles of organic agriculture, what keeps it working, is diversity and crop rotations. So even though many times for our farmers the Kamut grain is their most valuable crop and they can make the most money off of it, they are not allowed to plant more than around 20%, no more than 25 at the very most, but around 20% is what we normally allow them to plant of their total crop acres. We do not want to discourage them from abandoning good rotational practices, which keeps the whole organic system viable. The organic farmers right now in North America are doing very, very well economically. There's a huge demand that exceeds the supply. Prices of grains in the last 2 years have been abnormally high anyway, and the prices of organic grains are pushed up even higher because of that. So it's a little bit unusual situation we're in right now with the prices so extremely high. But we're always try to stay well above the noise of prices so that farmers have a guarantee of what they can expect. We set a price for the year, and we keep it that way for the whole year. We don't find excuses to discount our farmers, or if their quality if there's something a little bit off of their quality, but it's not feed wheat, it can still be blended. We don't discount them. We work together to help solve each other's problems when there are problems, and then when things go well, we enjoy the benefits of the program altogether. And our goal and our philosophy is that everybody wins, and that's how we try to put our project together.
Wow, great. So you've been doing this for over 35 years now, and I'm pretty sure that you have some interesting stories, whether it was starting out or maybe some setbacks that you had to face. Can you share one or two stories with our listeners?
Well, yeah. How much time do you have? We got lots of stories, all right.
Well, we'll have to bring you back for a story episode, but if you could just give one or two today.
Well, one kind of funny one when we first were getting started. My father happened to be out at the farm. I'm farming our farm now that was been the family since 1920. When we were both working together, he was just in our home one afternoon, and the phone rang, and he answered it. I was tied up with the kids or something. I forgot what I was doing. Anyway, he answered the phone, and I heard him say, "Well, no, we're really not interested in that right now." And he hung it up, and I asked him, "Well, who was that?" And he said, "Well, it's some company in Europe called Lima." And I said, "My gosh," I said, "that's one of the leading companies in Europe for organic grains." I knew about them. And he said, "Well, they were interested in some of our Kamut wheat, but I told them we didn't have enough, and we didn't want to ship it that far anyway." And of course, he didn't get any phone contacts, no follow-up or anything, and I was quite dismayed about that whole situation. And luckily, they called back in about 10 days or 2 weeks, and from their end, when my father told him he didn't want to sell to him, that made Lima want the grain all the more. So they were determined they were going to get their hands on it. So they called back and persisted and tried again, and this time I was able to answer the phone, and I told them we'd be glad to send them what they wanted. Those are some of the things that happen when you're first getting started. You'd have no idea where it might go. Some of our frustrations have been, it's not always been easy. We've had a couple times one time where we actually ran out of grain for about 2 months, and other close calls were because of weather or excessive demand, exceeding expectations, and then really harsh weather that destroyed parts of our crop. We've ran out before the next harvest, and that's been very, very difficult. So now we've been working on projects where we can put buffers together and extra storage and to work together to try to alleviate those kinds of things. When I first started, we knew that the Coruscant wheat was a very close relative to durum. And because durum, of course, is a pasta grain, I would tell our customers, well, this grain is like durum, so it'll make really good pasta. People want to know if they could make bread, and I say, oh, probably won't make bread, and probably won't do this, won't do that. And after a couple people brought their bread to me and brought their other products to me that they had made, and they were fantastic, then I would say to people, you can do anything you want with this grain. So I never discouraged anybody. After the first year or two, I didn't discourage anybody from trying anything with it. That's turned out to be a good approach because we've seen it used in almost every aspect the way wheat can be used, and even some ways that wheat's not normally used at all.
Very interesting stories. I'm glad Lima got back in touch with you, and it definitely shows that people always want more what they can't have. I think you're going to Europe next week, so I know you continue to market and go to trade shows. You know, what are your future plans for Kamut? Where do you want to take it in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we continue to search all over the world. I've been to almost every wheat-producing country of the world trying to see if we could grow it there, and we've come back to the upper Great Plains of North America as the best and most consistent and dependable source of high-quality grain. So that's been a little bit of a frustration. Now we're looking in countries of Asia and areas that we haven't studied before, but we have several challenges there too with logistics and being a long way from markets and that sort of thing. But we continue to look for ways that we can increase our acres and increase the number of people involved with the whole Kamut project. One of the big efforts that we're making is increase the number of organic acres under cultivation in North America. If we can have more organic farmers, we can have more growing Kamut grain for us. So that's one of our goals and projects right now. We think that the conversion to organic acres is a very positive thing for not only the farmers themselves, but also for the environment of the whole earth and for the health of the people and that live on it. So we are very big about, make a big effort with trying to do that. This ancient wheat, at least the Coruscant wheat, we've done started our research, is anti-inflammatory. We have developed a cell culture test that can test many other varieties of grain and see if they're inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And if we find others that are anti-inflammatory, like the Kamut brand Coruscant wheat, we would like to promote those and promote this cell culture tests and new breeding programs so we can eventually get rid of all these modern wheats that cause inflammation, replace them with wheats all over the world that are anti-inflammatory and have really important health benefits of having stronger antioxidant capacities and whatnot. So that's the long range of what we're doing, because the Kamut Baron Khorasan wheat is only grown in such a small area of the world. We know we can't feed the world with it, but we can encourage other people to use the same principles that we have found and change the whole aspect in the direction they go in wheat production. That's our hope. That's our goal.
Wow. Well, Bob, thank you so much for all this. We really liked having you on the show. And personally, two of the first listeners to the podcast were my aunt and uncle, and they are, how do I say, Montanans, or they've lived in Missoula, Montana for a long time now. So really great to have someone from Montana on the podcast. And it was a pleasure having you, some great stories, and we learned a lot today.
Well, it's my honor, and I really enjoyed it. And you're sure welcome to come visit us in person, or anytime you want to hook back up on the podcast, just let me know.
Thanks, Bob. And you can find more information about Bob and his company at Kamut, which is KAMUT.com. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.